Good evening to everyone in South Asia, and a very good morning to ones on my side of the globe. I am Naksha Satish, an urban design student and the India Design Leadership Fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. On behalf of the GSD Alumni Council, I'm delighted to welcome you all for the ninth session of the Design Impact series titled Hard City, Soft City, a South Asian Perspective on the Dichotomy of Physical and Operational Urban Technologies. Development in South Asia's Asian cities is fueled by technological innovations. In this quest, we are faced with a collective task. It's not just about optimizing the existing infrastructure for efficiency, but also to improve public health, create resilient neighborhoods, and enable an equitable governance. The first of the two panels, Hard City panel, unpacks the discourse of physical infrastructure beyond the top down modernist visions. The latter, Soft City panel, examines the operational urban tech that animates the city with bottom up civic innovations. The two panels, though set up as antithetical in scope, draw out the dialectic relationship between what composes and configures the South Asian cities. I'm very grateful to this entire panel of inspiring thought leaders for joining us today. I'm very grateful to the Alumni Council team and especially Anna Pinto de Silva and Peter Coombe for trusting in me to lead the efforts on this panel. And finally, to all you wonderful people listening from across the globe and truly uplifting the impact of this. As we get ready to dive into the weeds, a few housekeeping notes for the audience. The two panels will have short presentations followed by a moderated discussion that welcomes questions from all of you. Please use the Q&A function on the side and upvote the questions that you like. The chat function is also available to share your thoughts along the presentations. And finally, I'm excited to introduce to you the curator of the Hard City panel, Anthony Acciavati. Anthony is an architect and co-founder of Somatic Collaborative and a Daniel Rose visiting assistant professor in urban studies at Yale University. He works at the intersection of architecture and history of science and technology. He is interested in experimental forms of scholarship, pedagogy, and design afforded by humanistic inquiry. His most recent book, Ganges Water Machine, Designing New India's Ancient River, is the first comprehensive mapping and environmental history of the Ganges River Basin in over half the century. And above all, he's an inspiring educator. I invite Anthony to share his thoughts on the curation of the panel.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Naksha, and of course for the invitation to be here with all of you today. It's wonderful to be part of the two-part panel where we will begin discussing the hard city followed by the soft city. And so in our panel, we will be focusing on the ways in which this idea of a hard city will reorient how we see beyond the sometimes useful, but oftentimes barren dichotomies of hard and soft or nature and culture. One of the ways that we can move beyond these dichotomies is through drawing. Drawing remains at the core of design practice, even with new modes of visualization like GIS, remote sensing, and LiDAR, and new platforms for modeling like 3D printing, numerical, weather prediction, geomodeling that have proliferated. Drawing remains an activity of spatial description. From such modes of visual description and interpretation, designers derive expertise about the built environment. And so I think we will see how this also relates to issues of climate change and environmental uncertainty as well in the Hard City panel. And while I'll be sharing work from the Asian subcontinent and my co-panelist Koch will be sharing work from Thailand, one of the many aspects that connects our work is the intertropical convergent zone, or what is often spoken about as the monsoonal belt. And so I'm looking forward to the ways in which we will both discuss how we engage the vapors and precipitation produced by the monsoons to rethink urban life and urban form. And so with that, let me introduce my co-panelist, Koch Vora, who is a landscape architect from Thailand and works on building productive green public spaces that tackle climate change in urban dense areas and vulnerable communities. Koch was awarded from UN Climate Change for winners of the 2020 UN Global Climate Action Awards, Women for Results. She was featured in the 2019 Time 100 Next list, one of 15 leading women fighting against climate change from Time magazine, BBC 100 2020, and the Green 30 for 2020 by Bloomberg. She is a chairwoman of the Climate Change Working Group of the International Federation of Landscape Architects, and Koch received her master's in landscape architecture from Harvard University's Graduate School of Design and taught there as a design critic in spring 2020. Currently, she is also a TED Fellow and an Echoing Green Fellow. Koch, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for your kind introduction. I'm just gonna jump right into my presentation. And it's gonna be like a gallery view, just continues. And I'm just gonna keep talking. Yes, I'm very honored to be part of all these lists, like Time magazines and many other lists that, like Times. And I think just being a landscape architect and having my profession up there for people to get to know, because in this part of the world, landscape architect is just quite a new profession. I'm really honored to be like doing what I'm carrying off, and also just be promoting these professions. And I just feel that in the light and darkness, we actually cannot divorce what we are learning or what we are practicing. And the land that I'm from is actually swamp, or people might consider as a wasteland or wetland. And I just feel that right now the problems of not seeing the significance of this wetland is actually create so much problems of us to tackling this normal cycle of nature. This is how we are every day in the rainy seasons, only like 15 minutes of rainfall. And we just realize that we are not just the only living creature in this city, and there are so many more. And when my city hit the most disaster, like from flooding, is actually not the flooding that we used to understand. It's become like a huge disaster, flash flood. And of course, all those flooding brings such a lot of pollutions and dirty water. And this is like seeing from the satellite view that the huge water is coming from all the watershed. But really to understand that we are actually neglect many of the waterways and many of the natural infrastructure like canals. So you can see that we used to be called Venice of the East, but I feel that we are like Amsterdam's of the East. But right now we are actually like cutting down all those canals and the connectivities. And where's the water goes? That's very simple questions. So as a landscape architect, I think it's really, this is the mayor of Bangkok. And this is like, I just feel that this is my obligation as a landscape architect, not only to serve in private sector, but actually like to survive my city from revitalize the canal. It's very basic, but for now, it's like people in my cities view the canal as like a sewage way. So how can we reclaim this attribute of life to be part of who we are as Thais? And this is not only what we're dealing with, this kind of dynamic, using dams and using this concrete. We are actually at the point that we either adapt or die. Bangkok is one city at risk from climate change. And this is actually my work opening in 2017. It's actually Chulalongkorn Centenary Park. And it's the park, first new park in 30 years. Oh my gosh, 30 years. Some of you haven't been born yet. And this is like the city of 20 million people not having a new public space. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is such an opportunity to not just like having more recreation and areas only, but to address the thing that I just really feel that we are confronting the climate change. And back then, when I started my work in 2012, people are just still questioning, like, what are you talking about climate change? And right now, we are so certain that it's really part of our life. And in the region I'm from, we either confronting with flooding and drought. So this park is actually can contain like a lot of runoff, equipped with rainwater tank, the green roof, the wetland, the retention pond. And of course, serving this recreational purpose. And the UN secretary came to the park and visit and give a big support to this local climate solution. And the other thing that I feel that as a landscape architect, we should help the hard city, like solving the problems is food. And you might thought like, yeah, Thai food, we can eat everywhere 24 hours. Like it's such like a eating culture, the food culture. But we actually feel very vulnerable through this pandemics. Like many people have been like in poverty, living in poverties. And actually, this is like the biggest urban rooftop in Asia. And we just turning like the whole space of the rooftop. And I'm talking about the very dense urban context like Bangkok. You cannot find simply empty land anymore. So how could you insert all this landscape solution or the climate solution within what we already had? And this is like a big issue that the rooftop, the white space that create us even more problem with urban heat islands and many other things. So I'm using like these white terraces, which is really common in the mountainous area in the northern part of Southeast Asia and many other part of Asia to really cultivate food through rains. And if you're thinking about how could the buildings, of course, we like moving the mountain from other place to create the mountain in the wetland, which is like really wrong. But how could we incorporate the solution with how we build our city? So this rooftop equipped with solar roof, pumping up the water, just drain it through the gravity and slow down the runoff. And by doing that, create food, the organic food for the campus. I'm really serious about organic food because we are like top 5 importer of pesticides from Monsanto from the US, and how many chemicals that the US don't even consume themselves, but they sell to the country that still like working a lot with agriculture. This is like a big wall that I think is even bigger than the climate change that we're thinking of. So many people confronting with the death of cancer and many other things. So try to teach the younger generation, a new generation about the possibility of the safe food, also slow down runoff 20 times, pouring rain in these regions, monsoon and many other things. And yes, I'm very honored that this work is actually got architectural award, and I'm glad that I'm a landscape architect in the architect's realm. And yes, also the green infrastructure. And this is like working with the mayor in this abandoned infrastructure of the city, like corrupted infrastructure. We had a lot in Asia. And they're actually turning that amputated bridge, which is left unused for 40 years, into the first pedestrian bridge across the river in any capital of the world. So working with narrowness, working with the left infrastructure is actually something that I think we need to thinking of, because when all the cities infrastructure getting old and not functioning well, how can we live with those structure in this hard city and integrate adaptive reuse programs like unused helipad, a lot of waste space, we turn it into the healing garden, the biggest one in the hospital, in the government hospital, and also like the hospital. And also last semester I taught at GSD. It's like the first studio in Bangkok. I'm really honored to like bring like my students to the flood community in Thailand and really have them learn that being a designer this day, you kind of neglect the factor of climate change and the uncertainty that no one have defined yet. And it seems like we're working with a lot of unknown. And how could we not leave anyone behind, especially those who live in the city and also living in this like great risk at the sea level with the coastal city, delta city around the world like Bangkok and the fishermen communities. There are, yes. So I think it's actually like a new role of designer, and how can we really understand all these dynamics and have the community have the right decision. Yes, I think am I over? Yes. So back to you, Anthony.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Koch. And again, thank you, Naksha, for inviting us to be part of this panel. Today, I'd like to speak about the virtues of seeing like a mudskipper, which is pictured here, or it should be pictured here. These beautiful amphibious fish can live on land for days on end. These fish that live on land easily move between wet and dry, hard and soft conditions. Indeed, they are mud-loving creatures that have inspired my working in the Ganga River Basin for the past 16 years. They not only move between wet and dry with ease, but they have also evolved so that when they are above water, they see clearly like human beings. Whereas when we submerge ourselves, our vision becomes wavy due to how water refracts light different than air. Mudskippers, however, continue to see clearly and can see long distances. This kind of double vision can teach us a lot about how to incorporate environmental uncertainty in our work as designers and stewards of the built environment. And hopefully they can assist in seeing beyond dichotomies like hard and soft, water and land. I spent a better part of a decade seeing like a mudskipper to create a dynamic atlas of the world's most densely populated river basin and its hyper-engineered river basin, the Ganga. Rather than trying to shoehorn this fieldwork and archival research into a short presentation, which is a book and exhibition titled Ganges Water Machine, I will share with you some mud-loving moments that epitomize the virtues of seeing like a mudskipper. Seeing like a mudskipper means attending to this substance that you see here, silt. Ever since the subcontinent collided with Asia 50 million years ago, trillions upon trillions of tons of silt have shed from the ever-growing Himalayas during the tempestuous firewater cocktail that we call the monsoons. This silt is what makes the basin rich for agriculture, and its choreography rewards scrutiny. Indeed, today between 1 and 1.6 billion tons of silt are shed annually from the Himalayas and across the Gangetic Plains. Now, let me take you to a city in the center of the Ganga River Basin that I've been drawing and visiting for the past 16 years, Prayagraj. And I will show you how, despite the efforts of many to transform this city and its inhabitants into a smart city, it is far too wise to succumb to becoming a smart city. Located at the confluence of the Ganga and Jamuna rivers, these drawings combine cartography and photography to capture the cyclical rhythms of the monsoons over the course of a single year. What do I mean by this? For example, this drawing shows how surface water bodies like riverbeds and lakes and ponds expand and contract over the course of a single year due to the monsoons. Observing these slow motion changes are crucial to understanding the urban form and urban life of the city and its environs. Throughout 2005 and 6, I visited the confluence of these two rivers at least once every 2 weeks, where I snapped photos like you see here to create a panorama of the way the area goes from arid and dry to wet and gelatinous silt every year. These panoramas, as I will show, complement the slow motion changes I was documenting cartographically. They show a different on-the-ground perspective. This is a panorama taken during Magh Mela, an annual religious festival that takes place at the confluence every January and February, where a temporary city is constructed on the banks and sandbars of the two rivers. It is full of tents, has electricity, running water, and between 2 and 3 million people pass through the tent city over 45 days. Once the festival ends, the outline of the gridded city remains on the ground, and farmers move in to sow and seed crops. In other words, the banks and sandbars are transformed from a hyper-dense and urban space to an agrarian space in less than 2 weeks. Farmers harvest their crops, the monsoons arrive, eroding the sandbars and shoals, and completely washes away the ground. This process of urban to agrarian repeats every year. This combination of cartography and photography captures these slow motion changes and the ways in which people build on the deep rhythms of the monsoons. And of course, this is also the site of the Kumbh Mela, often spoken about as the largest gathering of humanity on the planet, where between 80 and 100 million people pass through the area over the course of 45 days. But what is more spectacular to me about this space is that it goes from this tent city to this agrarian space in 2 weeks' time. As you can see here in this photograph, the footprints of the tents and avenues remain tattooed on the sandbars. It is literally a drawing at the scale of the territory. This is the most intelligent use of space I have ever witnessed. Drawing these processes provides a blueprint for how to build on these deep rhythms of the monsoons, a process that more and more parts of the world would benefit from with climate change and greater environmental uncertainty. Now, Seem Like a Mudskipper also led me to making my own prosthetics and instruments to visualize the dynamism of this basin. Because it had not been mapped in half a century, I had no choice but to develop guerrilla tactics to measure these changes through devices like the surface accumulation sleeve, a prosthetic that one wears over their right arm to map soils. It is equipped with a GPS unit, as well as rolls of packaging tape, so that just as Spider-Man shoots his web from his wrist, I shoot packaging tape from my arm to collect soils. The imprint left in the soil shown here is from me shooting 1 kilometer of packaging tape perpendicular to the river channel to collect soils. And here you can see the instrument exhibited in Seoul in 2019, and here a diorama capturing the prosthetic and how it works. Along with being like Spider-Man's web, the packaging tapes acts very much like the magnetic orb one sees in Takahashi's 2004 game, Katamari Damacy, where small objects like spoons and paper clips start to adhere, and as more objects stick to the orb, it grows with jungle gyms and cars, eventually snowballing to the point that it collects stadiums and entire city blocks. My strands of tape collect soils, but also flowers, fecal matter, plastic, auto parts, and more. These artifacts from human and non-human occupation allow me to conduct an ethnography of the soil. Using the wrong thing for the right purpose very much defines my work. And like a Mudskipper, these devices allow a user to move back and forth between fieldwork and lab work like this diorama captures. Now, after scanning many kilometers of tape, I didn't have instruments to analyze the soils. So I turned to that trusted Photoshop tool, the magic wand, which might be used like this when one wants to digitally place a tattoo on someone's chest. But I misuse the magic wand to break down particle sizes. Using the wrong thing for the right purpose allows me to make my own remote sensing device when no data is available. I use these techniques of using the wrong thing for the right purpose to make drawings of not only Prayagraj, but also transects like these across the basin to render the dynamism of it. I like to think of these drawings more in terms of fashion. If most cartographic drawings are like couture, like say Givenchy or Dior, where the measurements are customized to a specific body, my drawings are more like ready to wear from H&M and Uniqlo. as they have what in apparel design you call a seam allowance, so that if you gain a few pounds or lose a few pounds, they still fit. As more and more of the world faces environmental uncertainty, it's crucial that designers use their skills to both read the world and project the world. Seeing Like a Mudskipper offers some clues, I hope, in how to do that. Otherwise, we are likely to suffer the consequences of sight without the benefits of insight. Thank you.
Well, Anthony, I really like your presentation, especially all your dynamic atlas is like really not just reading about the landscape, but how you read the landscape. So I just really have questions about like, as a designer who really like walk the river, like through the human perception, and have to like come back and work in such a huge scale of like watershed. How could you link those like to scale, and what have you learned through this process of like being in the place and then being outside from the place, like non-site, on-site?
Thanks. That's such a, I think, great question, and it so very much also relates to some of the questions I'll ask you. I think that for me, one of the things that I think relates to both of our modes of working, and also because of the context that we work in, is the need to be able to work across scales. And so I would say that part of what I try to do in the work that I've done over these past now 16 years is to look at, say, bottom-up processes that are taking place, oftentimes very decentralized, like groundwater infrastructure in South Asia, which is a completely unregulated economy, and say the very large top-down projects of canals that were instituted for irrigation, but also so important for drinking water. My drawings are kind of, you almost think about, they're like at a middle scale. It's like where the very big and the small hopefully meet. So then that oftentimes that middle scale can sometimes be at the scale of a house. It can be at the scale of a park, or even I think at the scale of a city. So I really try to work across those scales and understand how all of these processes are entangled with one another. So maybe if I had to do a more kind of made for Zoom answer to that really good question of yours, I would say that I really try to look at the ways in which infrastructure can be multi-purpose and not monofunctional, as it's so oftentimes treated. And it's already practiced in that way of being multifunctional, but how do we build upon that as designers? So I think, though, that, that's such a great question that you asked me, and it really relates to what I wanted to ask you, which is that, with your focus on living with water, which is, I think, just such a fantastic way that you're trying to engage Bangkok, and the ways in which your park can retain, amazingly, 1 million gallons of water during, these surges of the monsoon. I'm curious to see, hear how you foresee a network or patchwork of these parks and new public spaces evolving in Bangkok in the years to come.
Well, it's such a really hard when I'm actually used to work in the state and then moving back when the profession hasn't definitely not well established, like what is landscape architects, and I just feel that just when people think about landscape architect, they think about park, but I just feel that how can I make the park more available through the context of the urban fabric that we have. It's like through all this waste space, because as I mentioned, 30 years without a new park in the central city is something serious for 20 million people city. And I just feel that it's actually really challenging as a landscape architect with like no room to work in, or with like no recognition of the profession itself. How could like this solution, the green solution, can be integrated into such a dense urban context? Like we don't have enough land and it's so expensive that people or even the government don't want to even just give up to create this solution. And I just feel that I really like when you start your presentation about amphibious, and it's such a really keywords to the Thai living with the water. So how could that, the design of course, I'm studying GSD and learning all these modern parks around the world. But when you have to introduce the park with the amphibious meaning, what could that mean in the context of Bangkok? Yes, thanks for the questions. And I really want to like understand you mentioned about all this scale, and you mentioned about all this kind of like the cultural part of the river culture, and also this really hard infrastructure that is kind of like the trend of what we are leading to. And I just feel that we have a hint that those hard infrastructure or the hard city or like dams and all this equipped with the nature is not gonna lead us anywhere or even create us even more problems. So what would you say about the future of Gans River that you study, and what would be the right combination between like human, nature, technology, and all this development? Sorry, it's such a big question, but I would like to hear from you.
Well, I think it's a great question, and I'm going to try to do a more made for Zoom answer for this one than my previous answer. I think that what's fantastic about working in a context like the Ganga River Basin, right, where over 500 million people live in this area, the state of UP, where I did a lot of my work, has over 200 million people living in an area half the size of California and produces close to 18% of India's food grains. So it's this incredible patchwork of agriculture and city or human settlement. And so I think that when working in a space like that, these kind of classic notions of that come especially from the West of nature versus culture just completely fall apart in a context like this. So I think that a place like the Sangam is a fantastic space where you can start to see how both humans and non-humans are co-authoring space. It's a way in which I think the monsoons, these deep rhythms, are incorporated. And of course, the monsoons are incredibly capricious. So the sandbars are never the same way twice. Even though there's a kind of gridded city put down, when you look at it over time, it's quite different. So I think there's both that. Again, it's a little bit like fashion terms, I would say, that it's more like ready to wear. So you gain a few kilos, lose a few kilos, it still works. And I think that's just such an intelligent other events that happened there as well. So I think more than striking the right balance, maybe it's more like what sometimes people call dynamic equilibrium seems to me to be the way to do that. But I can't say I have something like a best practices per se to advocate for. It's more just there's a choreography that one should attend to, I think, in order to incorporate those dynamics. I don't know if that answers your question though, Koch.
Well, I guess it kind of makes sense. Like we couldn't have a fixed answer, like how to deal with this dynamic itself, but it has been like many decades that we try to fix the solution. That I just feel that we should kind of like learning through dynamics and finding kind of these amphibious solutions or even like the adaptive solutions. And I'm still struggling myself how to deal with the problems in Bangkok and in the Delta city. Yes.
Well, it's hard to imagine not only a better question, but kind of a response to my answer for what I'd love to ask you, which is really in thinking about porosity and the ways in which soils, which I think is something that you and I are both kind of maybe obsessed with, or at least I should say I'm obsessed with, but I suspect you are as well, are often continuous and layered in a city. But as we know, and as you showed so beautifully, property rights and transportation routes oftentimes fragment these continuities and layers in ways that make it a challenge to live with water, as you propose. So are there ways in which you think it's possible to incorporate private land holdings in a city like Bangkok? I know you said before the government's kind of wary of even touching this, or would it really require a different form of ownership and cooperation? in the future in order to do more of what you're trying to advocate for?
Well, I think there are like two subject in your questions. One is like how we perceive the city, and through like urban designer or even just landscape architect or architect, they only see like the city is flat. Even with topography, they don't feel like it's a quality of the dimension with the water, with the rain, with the underground water. And I really love your experiments of how you work with the soil and how you work with the groundwater, because that is such like a key, because in the Delta sinking, and with the IPCC report that the sea level rise it's become certain. And I just feel that, and if we still keeping building our city like the way we are doing right now, not even thinking about how much we have to collaborate with rains and how we're gonna sink with all this load, and how I just feel that porous really like give the concept of the three dimension of the land that we are on itself. And I just feel that what if we sink, like if we have to live on stilts again, or if we have to commute through boats again, I think the land property and many other things have to like rethink. But nowadays, of course, like there are this kind of EIA and for ratio that you have to contribute this green to the city. But I don't think that's enough to the problem that we are confronting. And it's a little more challenging because private sector is, of course, concerned with the profit even more than the government sector. And how to pursue the government and bring along with them is actually like a part of our job nowadays. Yes. So it's actually like we both like working on this such like a huge problem. And for us to like really make our solution and our time on this planet efficient, if you have to tackle or if you have to do something like acupuncture in your watersheds that you study, what would that be the solution that kind of like mighty and make change in the sudden through the problems in the Gans River?
So I think to answer your question, I'd have to refer to something that I didn't show in the talk, which would be to really one of the things that's most devastating, and I've written about this in the New York Times, and I also write about it in my book, is the way in which groundwater extraction is happening completely not only unregulated, but at such a pace that aquifer recharge cannot happen. And this is happening through tube wells, these kind of bore wells that are bored into the ground to draw up groundwater. And so I've been working on schemes of how do you start to not literally try to regulate all of these tube wells or count all of them. That's a little bit like trying to plow the sea, but instead, how do we start to model different configurations so that we start to pair groundwater recharge with public spaces, with new forms of permeable surfaces, because urban growth and human settlement across this area has just really made it more and more difficult for the monsoons to really recharge these aquifers. So I would say that would probably be the one thing where I see kind of the acupuncture kind of reference that you're making, quite not to be too literal about it. I'm trying to be more literary about it to do that, but that's where I would say I think there's a lot of potential in terms of the role of design, and also where the sciences, landscape architecture, and planning and urban design can really all come together to offer many different insights into this area. I kind of want to do now the reverse of what you just asked me, which is to say, so you've shown us this incredible work in Bangkok. Like, I'd be curious to know, to use a friend and colleague of mine's term, if there's an exportable analytic, as my friend Henry Coles would say, look, is there something that you see that can be exported from the kind of research you've been doing to other parts of Southeast Asia or the larger monsoonal belt, that your work in Bangkok, I think, could benefit other parts of the world?
Well, I think the solution is actually replica in many other areas, but of course, with the same solution of hidden rainwater tank in architecture, but we need to understand in each area of the return of the rain rate in each area. And right now, how the infrastructure can handle this change. Normally, it's like only like 25-year period of rain, but nowadays we have to think about the 100 years period of rain according to the climate change. So I just feel that like rainwater tank or what we have taught in the school, like wetlands and many other things, but it's not just the design of just the city beautification. It's not only just about the form, but I just feel that it's also need to incorporate the real number, the data, the texture of soil, and be more precise on what we are talking about. And we need to talk about the flow of the water in each area as well. So I think many solutions around the world, we need to talk more and replicate this solution, but make it like the fashion that you say, like kind of tailor-made a little bit to the site specific. Yes.
I think that's a really great way for us to conclude the panel, from us working in the supposed hard city to now going to the soft city. And so I'd like to introduce Rohit or Rit Agarwala, who is an executive in residence at Closed Loop Partners, an investment firm focused on the circular economy, and a senior fellow at the UrbanTech Hub at the Jacobs Cornell Technion Institute at Cornell Tech. He also teaches urban policy at Columbia University, and recently chaired the Regional Plan Association's 4th Regional Plan for New York metropolitan area. Until 2020, Rit was a member of the founding team at Sidewalk Labs, where he was head of urban systems and led its mobility and sustainability work. Prior to that, Rit spent 5 years at Bloomberg Philanthropies, where started the foundation's environmental grant-making program, served as president of the board of the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, and led the sustainability practice at Bloomberg Associates. From 2006 to 2010, Rit served as director of New York City's Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability, where he led the creation and implementation of Plan NYC, a greener, greater New York. Plan NYC has been hailed as one of the world's best urban sustainability plans, leading New York City to a 19% reduction in its carbon footprint since 2005. Prior to joining City Hall, he was a management consultant at McKinsey & Company. And Rit, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Anthony, and thank you both, Koch and Anthony, for such a fascinating conversation. And I'm really excited to kick off this conversation on the soft city, on the other half of this, because as your discussion made us think so much about the relationship with the land, and particularly the response that we all need to have to climate change. We're about to have a conversation on what I would argue is the other major force that is going to shape the city of the 21st century and require a massive amount of design response. And that is, of course, digital technology. Technology's impact on cities and our built environment is at once obvious and still, I'd argue, underappreciated. To really understand this, we have to go beyond what I would argue is the tired concept of the smart city. And recognize that urban technology, of course, has been with us since the canals and aqueducts of ancient Rome and ancient China. And this is one further evolution of that. And I particularly tend to see it as if technology, if steam was the driving force of the 19th century, electricity of the 20th century, both of those required new ways to design our cities. They put new demands on our cities. And I think technology in the 21st century is going to do the same. We're going to explore a couple of topics with three great panelists and our fantastic moderator, Anaksha. One is around how does technology shape the way we use the city, how we shop, how we move, how businesses operate. There's the question of how does technology shape how we understand our city as citizens? How do we evaluate our environment using technology? And how does technology enable or hinder how we manage cities, both from a kind of technocratic point of view as government and as citizens and voters, and the relationship that politicians and elected leaders have to have with citizens and voters. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Naksha to go ahead and introduce our panelists and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit, for the generous introduction. I'm delighted to be the moderator for this session. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today. We have with us Mr. Dalit Herith, a very well-known, successful serial entrepreneur from Sri Lanka. He rules the e-commerce industry in the country, being the founder and chairman of Sri Lanka's largest e-commerce organization, Kapruka.com. Over the years, he has been instrumental in exploring further opportunities by founding Kapruka Global Shop and setting up the largest coffee house chain called the Java Lounge. He also co-founded Grasshoppers, an e-commerce logistics enterprise to provide services to small companies in the country. I invite Dalit to share his challenges of bootstrapping the e-commerce industry in Sri Lanka. Dalit, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Naksha. So I will really wear the hat of my Grasshoppers company and share some challenges I see in the whole region when it comes to e-commerce and the major boom in e-commerce. And if you look at countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, even Bangladesh, you would see that the e-commerce is growing almost at a year-on-year growth rate of about 100%, 150%. And actually last year it was 170%. So it's really booming. But what's not booming is the existing infrastructure or the layouts of the city, the address systems, and it's just the fabric of e-commerce is growing so fast, but the rest of the designs of the city and is not. So let me go to the slide that you're looking at. It says that it's Sri Lanka and these countries that I spoke about is about 70% rural. Okay? That's a big number. That means, if there's 10 million people, there's 7 million people are not in the main cities, but they're spread out across the rest of the country. And most of these people, they use cash for the e-commerce transaction. So COD, or cash on delivery, is a major piece. Sometimes about 90% of all e-commerce in these countries happen through cash. That means they go to a website, they order the product, but they will pay cash, as like a pizza delivery. Now imagine if this happens in a country like in the US, where an Amazon guy comes and every day asks cash from you, there will be a large percentage of orders failing, right? So it's a big issue. So that's number one. I'm going to talk about two issues, and I'm going to tell you the solution that we used in these countries to fix it. Second issue, the slide you're seeing, that is the address problem. Now, if you walk down New York or you walk down Boston, you will see these nice post office post boxes, perfectly numbers, zip codes, sub-zip codes, all that. But most of the addresses in this part of the region looks like what you see on the screen. Some of the houses don't have numbers. Some of the houses actually have a name. There's a house called Lotus in the city of X and in the district of Y. That's it, 3 lines, and that's the address. So I suggested, I explained 2 problems. One is the cash problem. Yeah, the country is not ready for e-commerce because of the cash issue. And the second is about these address challenges. So here's the solution that we gave. We created this company called Grasshoppers and really went down local. Now, if I tell a local entrepreneur who lives in that district wide, hey, where's the Lotus House? He will know just like that. And he will know the neighborhood so well. And he will know the guy there, the recipient, whether he's going to carry cash or not, all that. So we really mobilized an army of local entrepreneurs to do the logistics in the 70% of the country that we cannot touch. So when we give an order to the local entrepreneur, he figures out how to do the last mile delivery. He figures out the challenges. He resolves it. Actually, there's very little tech in this, ironically, but really dumbing it down and really giving the tacit knowledge or harvesting the tacit knowledge of the local entrepreneur really made a big difference. So coming back to the 30% of the urban area, I mean, how is that changing in these parts of the region of the country? Is one of the main things is the post office has to really ramp up. Right? The local post offices in these regions really need to ramp up, and they are not ready for e-commerce. They are just still, stamp, envelope, letter delivery. They're not packaged, and they don't have the tech beneath them. If I had one wish to talk to, get something done in Sri Lanka, I'll be like, really upgrade the post office. Take all these countries that I just mentioned. They have a huge potential in upgrading their post offices because these are, 100-year-old institutions that has a lot of muscle in these countries, but they just, haven't grabbed the low-hanging fruit of e-commerce. So if you can, Nakshan, move to the next slide. I will talk about the major growth on e-commerce in this region is backed up by social commerce. So there are loads of smaller sellers who has maybe 10 or 20 items, simply sell products on Facebook, Instagram, etc. And about a good 80% of the trading happens through these social sellers. Thank you very much, Naksha. That's my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Dalit, for outlining the challenges and innovation in bridging the last mile gap. Our next speaker for today is a visionary woman who strives for gender-inclusive urbanization. Kalpana Vishwanath is the co-founder and CEO of SafetyPin, a social enterprise that uses technology and data to advocate for the safe urban spaces with partnerships in more than 25 cities across India and even globally. She is the member of several organizations, Women's Safety Committee of the Delhi government, Safe City Indicators on the Indian Bureau of Police Research and Development, a member of the advisory group on gender issues at UN Habitat, and the International Center for Prevention of Crime, amongst many others. She has published widely and co-edited a book on building gender-inclusive cities. I invite Ms. Vishwanath to share her practice stories of what it means to see the world through the eyes of women and other less dominant gender identities.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here and wonderful to hear Dalit speak about how technology is being used, and actually it's not even very high tech. One of the issues that we face in India, but as I have been working over the past several years, I realize this is not just an Indian problem. And this is the fact that our cities have largely been designed and planned with the male as the norm, and it's actually designed for a particular male, often a heterosexual, able-bodied male who use the city. And for women, one of the biggest issues that sort of determines the way that we are able to access our cities is based on the concept of safety. Now, safety is very important because it is not just an issue of crime, but it is about how safety prevents women from being equal citizens of the city. And what happens is when you feel unsafe, or when a particular place is seen as unsafe, women are either self-policed or policed not to use the city in the same way. So when we say we want to build gender-friendly cities, what do we mean? We don't just mean we want to address crimes against women. We want to talk about what we say as the right to the city, and how the right to the city impacts the way that I can, as a woman, I can work, I can study, or I can access leisure in the city. So this picture that you see It's actually an uncommon picture in South Asian cities to find women, young women, confidently occupying public space without fear and just using it in that sense. So I think the idea is to say, how do we build gender and other identities into the way that cities are designed? So I'm going to briefly talk about Safety Pin, which is a young company. We're about 8 years old. We're a social enterprise that has used technology as an enabler to design gender-friendly cities. And we use this through a series of technology platforms. One is called My Safety Pin, which is a free app for crowdsourcing data, where women and anyone in the city can actually do a safety audit and talk about where they feel safe, where they don't feel safe, and why. We also have other tools through which we generate data. And we have, over the past 8 years, worked in many cities around the world, primarily in Asia, in Latin America, and some in Africa. And the purpose of Safety Pin is to really generate data that can be useful, that can change cities. It's not just measurement for the sake of measurement. It's assessment in order to bring about change. So really for us, technology is a way of enabling social change. So this picture is a very interesting one. It's a map of Delhi, and the left is a picture of, or was actually a study that we've done measuring the dark spots of the city, because we know that lack of lighting makes spaces unsafe, not just for women, but for everyone. And a project that we did with the Delhi government in 2 years, we actually managed to reduce the amount of dark spots in the city. In another project in Kolkata, we looked at accessibility on streets. We've worked across cities. And one of the things that people ask us is, give us data in ways that is useful. So you can tell us that the entire city has problems. How do you correlate it? So one of the things we say is, where do women go? And those are the places that you need to fix first. We also use the media as a way to conduct advocacy that is, that engages city governments to actually bring about change. And the idea is you can move. So we also work with communities. So this was an exhibition we did called Ana Jana, which is about coming and going, where young women mapped their journeys through the city using both Safety Pin app as well as WhatsApp as a way of diarying their daily experiences of the city. And this was made into an exhibition which was put up in one of the metro stations in Delhi for 1 month, where the public actually interacted with these young women's journeys through the city and where they felt they could or could not go. Some of the other work that we've done before, while we just finally, actually Colombo, we did a recent study in 5 of the municipal areas to look at accessibility, to look at what makes cities more friendly. And the point is really to unpack. Technology is a way that we collect data, then unpack it in order to actually push urban actors to make changes. And I'll just wind up after this. A small project we did in Hanoi was to look at how metro stations can be made safer. And finally, in Bogota, we partnered with the biker community to actually map the biking routes of the city to make it women friendly and safer. So really, I will end by saying that there are just, for us, technology has been a way to reach more and more people. We recognize the digital divide, so we use many other ways. We sort of send out women in groups, sometimes to collect data, so that it's not only an individual exercise. And the idea is to say that we can build cities which are more gender friendly and which speak to everyone's needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana, for sharing how this thought needs to be incorporated at all levels. And this truly sets the stage for the next presenter. I'd like to invite all the speakers for a roundtable discussion as a culmination of all the mind-boggling ideas, questions, and provocations that has been posed to us. Please turn on the cameras for the panel discussion. And I would love to just initiate the conversation, but really feel free to cross-breed your own thoughts and ideas as we discuss. And to all our listeners, feel free to grab your coffee mugs for this last leg of the Design Share It. Urban tech is influencing the way cities operate as much as they're being shaped by it. And South Asian cities present a very unique case in that framing. We have a very global audience here today, and one that probably might be overweight significantly to the US. My question to all of you is, what aspects of your work do you think are very unique to your cities, Colombo, New Delhi? And what about it would be most different if you were doing them in the US rather than in South Asia? Dalit, feel free to begin.
Sorry, Naksha, I lost the audio feed for a minute. If you want to.
Yes. So I was just asking that we have a very global audience. So what do you think is very unique to your work, unique to being in Colombo, and how different would it be if you were doing them in the US rather than in South Asia?
Right. Yeah. So thank you. I think there's so much more opportunity actually to grow these kind of businesses in this part of the world because there's less competition. There are like the problems that we are solving does not exist in the West. The two examples I just gave you, the cash on delivery issue or even the address verification issue, those problems actually don't exist in the rest of the world. So we have a very unique opportunity in these parts of the world to actually solve these issues again.
Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I am actually I mean, there are certainly specificities of the problem in India and in Delhi on, say, addressing the way that women can navigate cities. I think there are certainly, say in Delhi, the city that I live in, public spaces tend to be more male dominated, and that change is something that we need to look at. Having said that, sexual harassment and women feeling unsafe in spaces after dark, public transport is actually a global problem. We've seen that this is something, whether it's the United States or the UK or even in other sort of African or Latin American countries, it is something that is a global problem. And so there are global solutions to this around calling out or campaigns and stuff like that. The kind of solution we're looking for is, how do you design public spaces? How do you actually design services? How do you make public transport more friendly, more gender friendly? And I think so there would certainly be different nuances there. I suppose in a city where the streets at night are much more lively, cities where there's active streets throughout the evening, and cities which empty out once it gets dark, you would have to have different kinds of interventions in the way that you design a city. But I don't think that the problem is a South Asian or an Indian problem. It has dimensions of it which are different here, but it's a global problem. And the solution needs to be really manifold in terms of in the way that we really decide that cities are spaces that are there for everyone. And when I say women, for us, women is an entry point. But I'm saying everyone who is at the periphery of city designing needs to be brought to the center.
At this point, Rohit, I'm curious to hear what your approaches are with the New York City government, and do you see any sort of overlaps? Of course, as Kalpana explained, the problem is sort of global, but in terms of the approach itself.
Well, look, I think, the challenge, certainly the one about gendered spaces, Kalpana, that you work on, there's no question it's a global challenge. I'm Dulit's observations around street numbering and cash are actually there are some small parts of the United States where that's an issue. It's actually only in the last, I think, 25 years ago or so that numbered street addresses became a legal requirement. There were still, as only 25 years ago in Westchester County, just north of New York, there were streets where there were no numbers because it was considered prestigious to say, oh, I just live at such and such, the named house. So I thought that was really fascinating. And one of the challenges, even here in New York, 15% of all New Yorkers do not have a bank account. And so they are cut out from the electronic economy, which is actually a real challenge and one that in my work at Cornell Tech we're touching on. So a lot of this does resonate. It's in some ways in different proportions. And I think, Roshan, your observation about the relative prestige, I think you are totally right that it is a great strength when you have people moving back and forth between the private and public sector. There are ethics issues that have to be dealt with when people do that, and there are some risks in terms of that perspective, but the cross-pollination of the skills between those two, I think, is really important. And in fact, one of the challenges that I think we see in US government is still that it's relatively hard to get young technologists to do that, frankly, because there's so much money being made and the culture of working in technology companies is so radically different that it's a challenge. So some of these challenges are if not completely universal, they are parallels across.
Yeah, and I think this is a good segue to understand the challenges that you're mentioning. Like, what are the tensions or questions that you grapple with in case of Roshan and in your case, in making these individual private sector initiated innovation projects as a part of mainstream planning?
If I may, just
yes.
take on from this, I think one of the things that I would agree with you on certain things, but on one of the issues that I'm increasingly feeling in many of our Indian cities is that, and though I run, I come from a technology company, I really think that technology cannot lead the way to solutions, especially to problems which have a social dimension. It must be seen within an ecosystem and as an enabler. And I'll give you an example, so if we look at even the problem that, if you want to look at, say, improve, even addressing pollution or reducing the carbon footprint or decarbonizing transport in our cities, one of the solutions, of course, is you can look at, there are technology solutions. There is the electric vehicle, there are apps, there are other ways of doing it. And I'm part of several initiatives around this. But I also know that unless you actually, go to the grassroots, go to the community and understand how will you change people's way of moving, it's not really going to happen, because people don't do things individually in their lives for a larger good. They do it if it makes sense in their lives, and I think once we recognize that, why did the population of India come down? It came down slowly as more and more Indians found that their children survived. It was not for the good of the country. I didn't have 2 children because I wanted India's population to come down. I had 2 children because I know my 2 children would 95% survive childhood and into adulthood. So when you improve the healthcare system and maternal mortality, you will find that this thing, So I think the understanding that when you have to have the social element, the ecosystem, the community, the wider, it can be business, it can be civil society, civic tech, women's groups, disability rights groups, the range of people, along with the technology solution. I still, I feel that, and I mean, I can see what all of you are saying, but the more I see it, if we only lead with technology, we do end up finding sometimes solutions which don't answer all the questions and which can bring their own problems in its wake often. I don't know, Dalit, that's what would you say to that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, the example I gave you about, really removing technology and going into the tacit knowledge of locals and tapping into that, actually, we couldn't have solved it any other way. That was the only approach to figure out where that lotus house is in the village, right? And the time will solve it, and there is always a time and a place for the technology. But as it comes in, there are some bridges that you need to make, build with the human element.
Yeah, I think what is also coming out from what Roshan and Kalpana you said, and is this idea of this pilot project or try one thing out. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on how do you see this as actually a way of scaling up or further institutionalizing or codifying the practices that you have as a part of mainstream? What could be the way to go about?
I don't mind starting on that one. I think it's actually an issue that I've been thinking about a lot, because I think in India, we have a lot of pilots. We have a lot of good pilots, and we're not able in most cases to make them sustainable and scalable. And I think that is a problem. And part of the reason is the institutional framework needs to be strengthened. There needs to be more integration of the institutional framework, And I'm actually going to take the example of Delhi, and Roshan will agree with me, I think. One of the problems in Delhi is the fragmented architecture of the institutions. So if you want to fix one thing, if you want to fix a road, there are 17 stakeholders who could very well have a hand in fixing that road. And so it becomes very difficult for anybody who's even, running the government, I would presume, to do that. So I think there are the bureaucracy, the way that our institutions, and this one here, I'm only talking about India. I think it's geared sometimes towards not scaling, not making things sustainable, not allowing innovation to move forward in many ways. And it's often a challenge. And all that is allowed actually is a pilot, because a pilot is in some senses harmless. It doesn't shake the way the institutional mechanisms, the line of corruption, any of that, so that happens. But, so I think we have to move past pilots. I think actually it's come to a time that, I think we should not be doing too many more pilots, because we have enough good practices. We have to now scale them and make them sustainable.
I'm sure we're all enjoying this conversation, but due to paucity of time, I'd like to wrap this up. It was a great provocating conversation. I'm sure it's left us with a lot of ideas to chew on beyond this itself. I'd like to pass on the stage to Rit for his concluding note.
Well, thanks, Naksha. And I just want to thank all three of you, and in fact, everybody from today's session. It was a fascinating look at a number of things related to the land and to cities and how we use them. And I'm really grateful. I take away, some of the questions around or some of the observations on the universality of some of these things, but also how the South Asian context is sometimes different or distinct. I take away the obvious importance of climate change from the first session on the hard city, the conversation between how people use the land and the engagement of the land and the water, and thinking about that, which is, of course, as important in the urban context as anywhere else, as Kacha's work demonstrates. And then I also take away Kalpana's observation that at the end of the day, technology is not the driver, it's not the solution, it's a tool. And sometimes tools require a different way of thinking. And I do think that technology is going to put significant demands on the world of design and how we design our built environment to deal with the opportunities that technology enables, but also the demands that technology puts on it. But there's no question that at the end of the day, cities are not in fact physical objects. Cities are communities. And good design, of course, recognizes that. Good technology recognizes that, and that all of these things are, in fact, in support of and in the service of the human experience. And so with that, I would like to encourage everybody to continue listening. We have a great next session on how to end homelessness. And I want to thank you all for participating. Thanks very much.